G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and I want to take a look today at a contentious little issue. The community and their relationship with Games Workshop in this What Broke the Fans episode. I specifically want to try and figure out why, when a valid point is raised about a particular failing of the company, or any company really, so many flock to defend the corporate giants, regardless of the merit of the point, the toxicity, or the perceived saltiness of it. For some odd reason, a lot of people defend even the most blatant predatory aspects of capitalism. And I say this as a person who is capitalist. They defend corporations, whether it's Games Workshop or Activision, for outright cheating their customers, screwing them out of money wherever possible, and blatantly lying to their customers' face and mistreating them. Now, that's a pretty strong opening, some would say, but please, bear with me. It's a What Broke the Fans. We go into a little bit of detail here. Now, a lot of these people often sound more like they're actual employees of these corporations than customers. They cite the need to make profits, the need to keep shareholders happy, to try and optimize earnings, and excuse even the most questionable business practices, often acting as an extension of an official corporation's spokespeople and PR that the corporations do not even have to pay, really. Personally, I must say this absolutely baffles me, because these people gain absolutely nothing out of it. And in fact, they often actually harm themselves and harm their cause by supporting the actions. So just how did this come about? How does someone get these people to actually act in a way that is detrimental to themselves, and why is it happening? My first assumption is that it's because people like to be right. If they choose to buy a product, it's not arbitrary. It's because they examine the options and decide the product in question was the best option at the time. I assume that everyone else identifies the best option when they purchase a miniature, so therefore anyone who purchases a different miniature or a non-Games Workshop alternative is essentially saying, you made the wrong choice and I've made the right one, and that makes people defensive. Of course, they're not literally saying that, but internally people have a perception that they disagree with your choice because they chose something else. And because people like to be right, we defend our choices, which typically manifests with brand loyalty. This is driven to an extreme, though, when full-price product is compared to, let's say, an equal-quality recast, and the person who paid full price wants to earn their full price back if they sell the original. This effect is most pronounced when dealing with companies who have a good PR division. The PR division pushes the idea that their customers are an elite group of people who have basically all made the right choice by going to this company, and it creates a group dynamic that can be almost sort of cultish. Look at Apple, for instance. During research for this topic, I actually stumbled across an interesting paper by Mansour Javed, Sanjit Roy, and Bano Mansour on consumer brand relations. The research reported here introduces the idea of brand defense as a marketing construct that explains the extent of consumers' favorable behavior towards their loved brands as a consequence of close consumer brand relationships. The study primarily focuses on the different intensities of consumers' positive word of mouth, WOM, behaviour towards their loved brands in a scenario of negative word of mouth, that is, positive word of mouth, brand advocacy, and brand defence. The objectives of the study were 1. To see whether brand love antecedes different levels of positive word of mouth behaviours, and 2. To see whether brand love can introduce consumers to defend their loved brands against negative word of mouth, and 3. To see whether other relationship constructs such as brand loyalty, brand trust, and brand forgiveness mediate the relationship between brand love and brand defense. Okay, that's a big word soup, but that was literally the introduction on their paper. In short though, the crux of the argument that they present in it is that the people studied developed an interpersonal relationship with the brands in question. Basically, a customer isn't viewing their relationship of a customer and a company, but rather they view it as a relationship between two humans, two friends even, and that an attack on the company is an attack on their friend, and thus an attack for them on someone they chose to associate with, and that makes them defensive. It's a very interesting read for sure. And I guess that also ties into people's feeling like they're part of something. Once they subscribe to one particular brand, for whatever reason, the initial justification behind the bandwagoning is less important than staying loyal and evangelizing their choice. Whenever you purchase a Games Workshop product, you know you're getting a certain level of quality, and that sells. And it's true, more or less, they probably do offer the best volume to quality ratio of all the miniatures companies. While you may be able to get similar miniatures for cheaper with other brands, the quality, especially when it comes to plastics, is suspect from product to product in some cases, whilst Games Workshop consistently puts out a certain level of quality product, provided of course you're not going with Failcast or Forge World, that is. On the business and profit side, the very thing is that as a customer, I don't need to care. I'm not the CEO, I don't get paid by the company, I do not have to care about their problems, profits or shareholders. All I as a customer have to do is to care about the product they deliver and which I attain. It would be fundamentally different if I was a shareholder, employee or CEO of said corporation, but in the vast majority of cases, the people who do defend the company are not. Yet many of these people sound like they are part of the public relation department of said company, or that they have a personal stake in it, and not just a few turn into something akin to pseudo-lawyers when defending said companies, acting as if they were their clients. We have historically seen this across videos where I talk about shipping, taxes, machine costs, labour costs, material costs, storage, warehousing, etc, etc, etc. Constantly, defenders come out of the woodwork to berate myself or the ideas I espouse, and they don't tackle the points raised. They simply repeat the mantra, they are a business, they exist to make money, as a shield against all critique. It also goes hand in hand with the bizarre, it's a luxury item defense. Just because it's a luxury item, it doesn't mean it's any less of a product, and people paid any less for it. By this bizarre logic, a diamond ring might as well turn out to be glass, or a car breaking down constantly, or a Rolex might actually be fake since it's all luxury. But then, we wouldn't really be allowed to complain about much of anything, since technically speaking we don't need even electricity for more than comfort. Another interesting study comes from Cone Communications. They reported that nearly 8 in 10 Americans, 79% actually, are more loyal to purpose-driven brands than to traditional brands, and nearly 3/4, 73%, are more willing to defend them, according to the 2018 Cone Porter Novelli Purpose Study. The study, examining consumer expectations and behaviours towards companies that lead with purpose, finds that purpose-driven brands can build a stronger emotional connection with customers, which goes far beyond transactional relationships. The research revealed just how deep this emotional connection can go. In fact, 67% of Americans feel purpose-driven companies care more about them and their families than traditional brands. Americans are transforming loyalty to purpose-driven brands from pride in being associated with the company to willingness to defend the organisation if someone speaks badly of it. In dot point form, basically, they feel a stronger emotional connection 77% of the time, they're proud to be associated with them 70% of the time, and they're more willing to forgive if that company makes a misstep 67% of the time. This enthusiasm to provide multi-dimensional support is in alignment with Americans' expectations that companies should lead with purpose. In fact, more than 3/4, 78% of consumers believe it is no longer acceptable for companies to just make money. They expect companies to positively impact society as well. And I'll just state right here, remember the phrase, Warhammer is for everyone? Anyway, moving on. Another interesting observation I found, though from a regular person, not a study this time, was related to Nintendo loyalty. I will quote here, "People defend Nintendo because they don't care about companies ripping off gamers, as long as they're not the ones who are getting ripped off. EA and Capcom were eviscerated because of locking updates behind $60 game purchases. Nintendo does the same thing with deluxe ports and everyone licks their boots." Whilst hyperbolic, the first sentence really resonated with me, because people defend a company because they don't care about companies ripping off gamers as long as they are not the ones getting ripped off. That's regional pricing in a nutshell, and something I've been saying for years. There's always this weird justification for it too, relating to median wages or income or such, which just crumbles under closer examination. But the quickest way for the pro-company bots to make a point is to Google, what does a UK person earn? And then, what does an Australian earn? Quote the number back with a smug grin of self-satisfaction. It's kind of like when people talk about gender wage gap rather than pitting person for person, job for job. They just end up taking all men versus all women and find that men in full-time employment earn more than women in part-time employment, or that aircraft engineers at Rolls-Royce earn more than Cindy at the local childcare. Cindy's a top chick providing a valuable service, but society has decided that the engineers designing the aircraft are simply worth more, just like how the staff at Forge World slipping a decal sheet into the post office box to ship to Suffolk is worth less than to stick the very same decal sheet in the mail to Australia, which involves a perilous journey where the staff member jumps through rings of fire, swings across a snake-filled pit, and after developing a life-saving cure for a deadly disease, they just barely manage to slip that A4 sheet paper into the same post box beside the paper headed to Suffolk for 40% more. Okay, I may have slightly exaggerated the last one. The fans at times can be so fragile that they can't even come to terms with the fact that the trolls and people who just farm rage, aka this channel apparently, the people that they're bashing are in fact long-time Games Workshop fans, like them. People who would like to see a return to the older Games Workshop, the real Games Workshop. No, they have to convince themselves that people are just jealous of Games Workshop, and they like to insert the tried and true, if you can do better, just make your own game system and compete against Games Workshop. Because you, Joe Blogs off the street with a great idea, can just jump up, compete with an $8 billion juggernaut with a 50-year head start in a saturated market. A juggernaut, it's always worth noting, stole much of what was great about the setting from other franchises, adapted it, which is fine. But then when others did it, they got very litigious. I guess I should probably wrap this video up before it outstays its welcome. So, to summarise the key takeaways I had whilst looking into the subject. 1. Customers form an interpersonal relationship with the company where the company is treated as an individual, and an attack on them is equated with an attack on an individual. 2. Customers are being tricked into thinking Games Workshop is a purpose-driven company, not only out there to sell luxury goods, but to send a message, which makes them a better entity and thus worthy of defense and admiration. 3. Customers see a perceived higher value product in Games Workshop and thus justify the decision to themselves and others in an effort to prop one another up, despite evidence being to the contrary. 4. Customers have formed an economic and decision-making tie with the brand, and if that choice is pointed out as poor, rather than taking it on the chin, they immediately get defensive and, like the stages of grief, will go through shock, denial, anger, bargaining, and depression. Acceptance is a very distant option here. And lastly, 5. Customers only take up a cause which directly affects them, and even then only when pushed beyond the limits of these other listed reasons. For example, regional pricing is okay when it doesn't affect them. Now, I know it was a bit of a slog, but this is the more technical companion piece to my video titled Toxic Positivity, and I feel pretty good about it. I know moving forward that people will disagree with me, which is fine. But you can tell, however, from the way they construct their arguments if they're disagreeing in good faith, or if they've fallen into one of the 5 pitfalls I listed above. You know now that when a person talks about a subject and ends it with the phrase, "Come on, Games Workshop, you said Warhammer is for everyone," when trying to shame the company into something, that they identify with them as a purpose-driven company. And you know that when a person says, "Recast rip off Games Workshop's IP," that they've decided the quality in a Games Workshop product is superior and that the mere existence of the recast threatens the value of their product. They may also have moral objections to thievery, but so do I when I'm charged 40% more for the same product because of where I live. And lastly, when they use some classic whataboutism to defend the company, such as Apple products are more expensive in the UK than the USA, so what Games Workshop does to Australia is fine. You know that they're merely trying to justify it to themselves, that a healthy dose of selfishness is a-okay because they're not the ones affected. And so it is that the customer defends the corporation. Anyway, what do you guys think about it? I'll be keen to hear in the comments below. I personally had a lot of fun looking into this and reading up on the subject, and it's actually very highly studied in business circles. There's obviously the psychology angle, where people are trying to understand how other people tick, but also companies want to know this from the money-making angle. How do you get devoted fans who are just going to gobble up whatever you give them? Some companies, that is the goal. They want that. They don't want anyone to question, to complain, anything. Just come in, consume product, move on. So, very interesting subject. Anyway, that's all from me. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all on the next one.